Hey, how you doing?
Sorry about that. I couldn't hear you for a second. Can you guys hear me?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Excuse me. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Doing great. Yourself?
Trying to stay active out there, doing lots of hikes and all that good stuff.
Yep.
Nice to get some good weather finally.
Yeah. I think, it's a blessing in disguise. Having the crummy weather most of the time, it's easier to stay inside. If we had the California or Florida beaches around us and all that other stuff, it would be harder to stay in.
Yeah. I was noticing a lot of they seem like maybe high school students or like younger people anyways, look like they had access to cars. Definitely seems like they're not really distancing as well.
You're absolutely right.
Like hiking together and whatnot.
You're absolutely right. And then I remember back when I was working in middle school, kids always all felt immortal, and whatever was going on, it didn't apply to them. We always try to set out examples for them to make better decisions. And I think we failed miserably trying to affect that with the kids.
Hey, Tom.
Now there's a beard that works. Tom's got it going. Mine's my beard's not it is less than effective so far.
All right. So here.
Eric?
Eric? Hello?
Eric?
I can hear you.
Yeah, who's that?
Eric,
Hey,
can you
Terry.
see me? Hey, Tom.
Good morning.
Is that you? There's something on your face there.
All right.
I'd say you've been in quarantine, Tom.
Yep.
Hey,
You look a little bit like the gambler there, Kenny Rogers.
I wish.
Well, not currently, though.
Right.
Yeah, we lost him a while ago, so.
Morning.
Morning.
It sounded like Gary.
Yes, it is.
And he's on video this
Oh,
time.
there he is.
King's all here.
The gang's all there. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for coming, and let's start the meeting then. Eric and I discussed it a few days ago, probably a week to 2 weeks ago, about having a meeting for May, since we haven't had one in a couple of months, at least to get the people together briefly for a meeting on some of the items that we discussed. And so today's meeting will pertain to the manufactured homes, the swimming pools, and lighting to some degree. And so what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Eric, because he's going to take care of monitoring everything and make sure that we mute ourselves in regards to so we aren't going to interfere. And are there any questions anybody wants to ask before we start the meeting or before we proceed?
Good morning, folks. Sorry I'm late. Who's that guy?
Chuck. Hey, Chuck.
Hey, Terry. John.
Morning, Chuck.
Grizzly.
Morning, Chuck.
Morning, Bob. Gary.
All right. So I guess if everybody wants to, I mean, nobody's getting a lot of feedback now, but of course the courtesy, I guess, on Zoom is to mute yourself unless you are have a question or want to talk in some fashion. But I guess let's start with a manufactured home one, just because that one really is the most simple. So I'm going to share my screen with everybody right now. All right, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Yes.
So
Yep.
the last time we talked about this, it was Chris Jensen had brought it to us, and essentially it was just a suggestion at that time, and then the Ordinance Committee said draft it up. So that's exactly what I did. This is the existing regulations for manufactured homes, and then here's the changes, which remove the kind of the structural part of it, which we can't regulate more than HUD, and then added the language here that Chris requested. That's pretty much it. It's exactly as Chris had requested it. And so if the Ordinance Committee feels okay with that, then we'll move it on to the various other boards and committees.
I don't, if you tell me manufactured home, I tried to look it up on the code. A manufactured home is not a panelized home. We're seeing lots of those.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
I mean, I guess they are kind of manufactured. It's probably a better question for Chris, I suppose. But for how we're looking at it here anyways, we're really just talking about manufactured more in the sense of like what you would consider a mobile home. Not like, what are they called? The prefabricated houses, essentially. That
Prefabbed or panelized.
Yeah, like key homes or whatever.
Correct. That's what I thought of when I read this. And then I went to the code. And again, I'm trying to read it on my iPad, but we talk about, you know, manufactured home communities and so on, but we really don't clearly define what a manufactured home is. If you've got two screens, maybe you can pull it up.
Gary, when we had Chris at the meeting, didn't he indicate that the manufactured home outside of manufactured home park is what this was going to pertain to mainly, or did I misunderstand him?
Yeah. Yep. I think what Tom is saying is that maybe our definition of manufactured home, which I think everybody has an idea of what this code is trying to regulate. Maybe at the time that it was added, didn't also consider that there would be like prefabricated homes of like a more substantial nature, like, you know, a single family home that'd be prefabricated and put on site.
And there are some beautiful panelized homes, and actually there's some, you know, like as you say, I guess key homes are panelized, and they're certainly manufactured.
And wouldn't this pertain more to?
Oh, there's a good definition.
Well, yeah, something that's delivered on a trailer, you know, towed down the road and then put in place.
Well, this dwelling manufactured probably is what I was looking for. I was looking under manufactured home, but let's read this.
Structure transferable in one or more sections.
Yeah.
We've
I think
almost
the phrase built on a permanent chassis.
that's
You
a
know,
good point.
It's not a mobile home in this classic sense that we're all used to, but it is something that's built someplace else, brought to the site and erected.
Yeah, because I don't think our intent was to have these homes, because next to me, there's a home that was built several years ago, and that came in 4 sections. But it has a foundation and everything naturally for it. It's not what I would consider, a manufactured home in the sense that this is code is looking at.
I think also there's this section which may not, or is maybe a bit more clearly exempts those ones from this. Designed to be used with or without a permanent foundation. Those homes, like key homes and whatnot, they're certainly designed to have a permanent foundation. They're not meant to be potentially mobile.
Yeah, I think this helps clarify it. I wasn't looking under dwelling. I was looking under manufactured home, and it really seemed to dance around the topic.
Yeah. So that answers your question then, Tom? You okay with that?
I believe it does. And a bigger question, can municipalities regulate manufactured homes? It seems discriminatory. It's like going into the tiny home issue.
We can to some degree. There's restrictions on it, obviously. I guess we can't really regulate where they're put. So you can't say like you can't have manufactured homes only in a manufactured home park, but you can place like certain aesthetic standards on them elsewhere. So that's how like apparently we get away with having a minimum lot size or a minimum square footage, and this proposed like aesthetic standard of having like skirting material or whatever, but we can't regulate it structurally or anything like that.
Is it legal to make them illegal in the Lake District?
I think that probably would be, yeah. But
that's what this says.
Yeah.
Yep.
check with Chris with it.
Wasn't Chris's issue that he was concerned about structures being built with the fiberglass plastic skirts? They became a maintenance problem. It also became an issue with frost and the plumbing being exposed underneath. And I think the whole intent here is to have some sort of masonry foundation that these structures be put on. So anything above the foundation is essentially, according to whatever state national codes allow for the buildings.
Yeah, the actual structural elements of it are regulated by HUD, I believe.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And then any aesthetic standards on top of that would be for us, and that's where the skirting material, placement on concrete foundation for aesthetic purposes. So yeah, I think that's correct, Chuck.
So I think this draft does what Chris at least wanted, and as long as it's to the liking of the rest of the committee.
I'd like to address this from a different perspective. So what I just heard you say, Eric, if I'm not mistaken, is that you could regulate it if there were some criteria associated with it. So the way this is currently written, as long as you have a minimum lot size, you could place one of these manufactured homes anywhere. And I guess my question is, are there other neighborhoods besides the residential lakefront district where we wouldn't want manufactured homes? And if the answer to that question is yes, then maybe we ought to put other criteria on manufactured homes being built outside of a mobile home park. So maybe we want to increase, as an example, the size of the lot so that these are placed in areas where there's a lot of green space and it's not put in a suburban type area.
It gets pretty elitist to do that, I think, John.
Yeah, I think the word is exclusionary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, do people want a mobile home in a suburban neighborhood?
They don't call it a mobile home. They call it
A manufactured
home.
Well, maybe we need to work on that definition a little bit. Just a thought. It doesn't matter to me. I don't have strong feelings about it one way or the other. So
I just worry about it from the discriminatory.
Yeah. I would leave it alone myself.
It does get into that exclusionary area. Certainly manufactured homes are one of the more affordable options. And since affordability is in the town's comprehensive plan, I don't think it's a great path to go down. And we've never had an issue with it in the past. So I don't think it's necessary for us to kind of go on it now.
It sounds good.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, because I think this is something Chris wanted, you know, and when he addressed our meeting, like Chuck said, that he laid out all the things that should be looked at to help the development office in that regard.
Yep. So, does anybody else have any comments on this one outside of what we heard so far?
I'm a little torn because there's such a broad brush. The worst of, or the most unsightly of homes that fall within this are objectionable, at least to my eyes. The very best that I've seen really don't bother me that much, but we're with the painting with the broad brush. I'm not, you know, I think all of us are concerned about the most unsightly, the most objectionable. But I don't have an answer for this, but I just have a, you know, I'm torn.
Well, does the committee want to move forward with this then? And if they do, I need a motion that we move it forward through the process.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Terry gets a second.
Okay. Motion and a second. And, any more discussion? If not, we'll vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No.
No.
We'll move it forward. Before we close the book on this one, does this identify, at one point Chris was concerned about the guy that has some serious acreage was going to put little cabins on it, or little pre-made cabins on it for getaways.
No, that doesn't get in this one.
Doesn't? That's a different issue?
Yeah.
Okay. Even if they come in on wheels?
A gypsy cart.
Wasn't that a project? Wasn't that a project down your way, Tom?
I don't know where it was.
It was over on Seneca Point Road.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a big empty field there, probably a quarter mile away from County Road 16. I've driven past that and I see it's all staked out for something. I don't know what. A lot of stakes in the ground and rope tying them all together, spread out over quite an area. So
there is further down on Seneca Point Road, somebody just bought a property that I think they're staking out to build a house on.
it could be that. Yeah.
The cabin property is actually one that there's already like a house. It's all, I think they've converted something else into Airbnb. I think that was done in the past, but it's like 70 acres, more towards like the first bend in Seneca Point Road.
Oh, okay.
We can do the lighting one now. This takes a second to open up, so bear with me. So, and Chuck, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but the planning board, the only real comment that they had was to add an exemption for flagpoles.
Yeah, the discussion started with, okay, if you're going to have your flag out after dark, you need a light on it. And then if you need a light on it, how do you comply with the code as drafted? And then the discussion evolved into the height of the poles, which is another issue. But I guess the concern was if you want to light your flag, how do you do so under this regulation?
Yeah.
You do it like I do. I got a solar powered light mounted on the very top of the flagpole. Lasts all night long.
Okay.
Would that be considered a civic use?
Yeah, you got a good point there, John.
Is it a big enough issue to worry about?
No. It was just two members of the board brought it up and asked that I bring it before the committee. I'm sorry, John, you referenced the civic use. Is that a provision that's an allowable? I don't have the code in front of me.
If you can
John
see
Casey?
it here, it might
Yeah,
be a
right
little.
there.
Let's see.
Bullet 2 under item F.
Okay, temporary lighting for events. Okay. Stretching it, but okay.
I mean, I suppose you could also say that it's a First Amendment freedom of expression thing, but it's a tough one to regulate whether it was in the code or not. You know, telling somebody they can't light their flagpole certainly become a political issue very quickly.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess the what if could be somebody has their flag lit from the bottom up on floods or something like that, and then the neighbors called up and said, hey, that light's bothering me. I can see it through my window. And then code enforcement officer goes out and says, well, it's really not compliant in terms of the horizontal, glare or illumination to the ground. And as long as we avoid that kind of confrontation, that's, I think, what we're trying to do.
I'd say let's leave it out, and
if it becomes an issue,
yeah, let's hope that our code enforcement officers have good discretion, I guess. If it's like an incredibly bright LED that looks like the spotlight at the racetrack or something like that, okay. But
yeah,
otherwise, hopefully
I want to complain about Terry Fennelly's light. I can see it from Foster Road.
You can read a newspaper 100 feet away, Chuck.
And I'll use your light rather than mine.
Well, most of the flag poles are in the front yard anyways, and so the person's certainly not going to have the light shining back at their house, so it's going to be shining somewhere away from their property, probably, right? But like you said, it's a minor thing.
You would think so, Gary, but neighbors will be neighbors sometimes.
Yeah. No, what I'm saying is you might get more opposition to it if it's shining across the road and stuff, or up its flag.
All right.
Then, but
not to prolong. Yeah, not to prolong the discussion. Let's we can move on.
Okay.
I think we've chewed this up enough.
So you want to eliminate that and just leave it to discretion, anyways?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, that was the only change from any of the boards. The zoning board, as I recall, and Bob and John, you can let me know. I don't believe they had any comments on this one.
I don't believe so either.
And the ECB did not as well. So otherwise, it's the same as the last version of this that we saw.
And fortunately, the guy that's enforcing it really understands this stuff.
Yeah. If I guess if somebody wants to, well, where we are in the process with this one, Gary, this is probably a good opportunity to touch on how we'll move forward with the town board. So this one's was previously approved by us and has been sent to the committees for their review, and we just got their comments. Normally at this stage in the process, we would give it to the town board for them to set a public hearing on. They'll refer it out to everybody again. But sorry, there's some feedback. So I guess right now the town board, due to the financial strain of COVID-19, wants to take a slower approach with ordinance changes. And so Gary, again,
Excuse me a minute, Eric. I don't think the majority of the town board have any idea about this. It's a conversation I had with the town manager. He'd like to package or whatever you want to bundle them, 2 or 3 or 4 at a time to go through, so that the expenses would be minimized compared to if each individual one is, placed through the system.
Okay. So we'll build up like a queue of potential changes and then bundle them together. So this will be, I suppose, number 1 in the queue. Assuming that the ordinance committee moves, seconds, votes on moving it forward.
So you want a motion on that, Eric?
Yeah, as long as everybody's okay with this.
Okay. Could I get a motion that we move the lighting forward also?
So moved. Chuck.
Second.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. We move the lighting proposal through the system. Any further discussion? If not, we'll vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Carried.
Okay.
The swimming pool one, Eric? We need to move that forward too?
Yeah.
That was coffee, right, Terry?
You bet. Just plain coffee, not Irish coffee.
We'll probably have a relatively short discussion on this, at least as far as the comments that we got from the boards, because again, as I recall, there weren't any from the planning or the zoning board on this one. So what you'll see here is exactly how it was when we last left it. So this is all takes place within the residential lake zoning district. The changes takes some of the existing code and kind of reformats it a bit. So it has to meet code requirements. All swimming pools can't drain directly into the lake or neighboring properties. How we will regulate in-ground swimming pools moving forward. One in-ground pool is allowed. They shall be located in the rear or side yard of a lot. So now the previous rule and what required this change was that pools could not be in the rear yard. They now will be. Still measured in lot coverage and have to meet the accessory structure setbacks. For above ground swimming pools within the RLD, you would be allowed to have one on the other side, so on the non-lake side. And shall only be within the rear or side yard.
Wait a minute, the lake side would be the rear side in many instances.
Right, so if it does not adjoin Canandaigua Lake though, then that would not be the lake side. So,
Okay.
Let's see where it says that. There's a section of code that says the mean high water mark is like the rear, or the setback shall be measured from the mean high water mark. Exactly that. Rear setbacks measured from the mean high water mark. So that is kind of the rear yard. If it doesn't adjoin Canandaigua Lake, then that would not be where we would classify the rear yard as. Does anybody have any comments on this one?
I just had a question from ZBA. The applications so far that we've seen are all modest in the sense that they're not visually, they're not a problem, and people are using good judgment. But in my mind, I'm wondering, what if somebody wants to put their spa embedded in a deck? Does that change the rules of the road a little bit with all that we're doing here? Would that be something that would be permitted?
I think we talked at a previous meeting, Bob. Maybe you weren't able to attend that one. That if it was on a deck, that was not going to be allowable on the lake side.
That's what I thought, but I wasn't sure for sure. I remember I had heard that once, but I didn't write it down. So would that be our position? Because I think eventually somebody is going to petition us for that. And that's the only question. It's not necessarily embedded in the wording here. I'm just wondering how we feel about that.
What do you mean deck, Bob?
Well, it can vary from different places. It doesn't have to be up one story. It can just be, you know, a kind of like a lanai or whatever. But some people would build that and then, you know, put the spa within that.
So we just, as a zoning board, approved a pool that was within a deck, but it was a plaza. It was paver deck.
Right. So that would be considered a patio.
And that's what raises the question: what define a deck?
Right. this is the only, I have this question because I'm guessing that eventually we'll see this at the ZBA. And I understand based on what we have voted for, I get that. But I'm just wondering because somebody always stretches it or pushes the limits a little bit. And I'm just looking for some direction.
And you're, again, when you say it's like on or embedded to the deck, this wouldn't be classified as an in-ground swimming pool, correct? You know, it's,
I don't know.
You're talking about placing it on top of the deck?
Well, or embedded within it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in it.
If it's,
Well, if it's set in like the middle of a deck, I think it would be very difficult to maintain it if they had to do any work on it.
Yeah.
so it can't be considered in-ground unless it's essentially 3/4 or more of its water content below the level of the surrounding. So if there's no ground there, then it wouldn't be considered an in-ground pool, wouldn't be allowed within that lot, especially, or if it adjoins Canada Lake.
So,
Right.
okay. So if their lanai or whatever is just, you know, 2 or 3 feet above the ground and they built a spa within that, most of it would reach your criteria then. That would be below the earth, and that would be allowed?
If their deck was 3 feet above the ground, it's unlikely that the spa would meet that definition, because the ones that we've been seeing are 3.5 feet deep or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't think that it would have 3/4 or more of its water content below ground.
Okay.
Do you guys see that frequently in the ZBA?
Not the exception I just mentioned, but
Yeah.
but of late, and John can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but we're seeing more of these, and the people are doing a good job. They're either putting a berm up or some shrubbery and whatever. And what we've been saying is the lip of the spa, whatever you call it, can't be more than, I think one of them was 1.5 feet or something like that, the lip above the level of the ground. And we were okay with that. Is that the way you remember it too, Eric?
Yeah, that's correct. And then, so we've seen 2 so far this year.
Right.
And then I just got a call the other day from somebody talking about potentially doing that, I think over on Fallbrook. Seems like it's the new hot trend.
Yep.
So. All right.
Yeah, I could foresee the ZBA is going to see requests for relief for decks. I'm sitting here looking out on my deck, and it used to have a hot tub on it, and it's up about 3 feet. So people are on the lakeside are probably, if they have a substantial sized deck, will probably have a desire at some point, possibly to put a hot tub on it,
Yeah.
and that would be in violation of these provisions, and you'd have to seek relief from the ZBA to do that.
Thing is, many times you're never going to know it's going up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It all depends on the neighbors.
Yeah.
You're right. Don't ask, don't tell is alive and well.
Bingo.
But again, I think these regulations, sort of do what we want it to do, but you may have the occasional outlier as far as somebody wanting to do something creative.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have that with just about every code that's on the books. It seems so there's always somebody trying
That's
to
what keeps the ZBA employed.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
Job security.
Right. Do we need any more to do with this then, Eric?
Now let's run it up the flagpole.
Okay. It's been out to everybody, so once you guys motion and approve it, we'll add it to the queue.
I make a motion, we do that.
Second.
Right. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Motion made and seconded on the swimming pools. Is there any discussion? There no discussion, we'll vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Carried that we'll proceed with the swimming pools.
Great.
You run it up the flagpole, but make sure that light doesn't spill over onto the
That's
neighbor's
right.
property.
We'll put it on Terry's pole.
There you go. Solar powered LEDs all the way.
Okay.
Haven't seen the sun since only yesterday.
What else do you have, Eric?
That was all of the ones that we had. Well, the lighting and pools were the only ones we had sent out. The manufactured home one was one of the last ones that we had here. I don't know if you want to talk about the off-street parking one or if
We can talk about it. We talked a little bit the meeting, I think it was the last meeting we might have had there in March. We can briefly talk about that. I'd also like to ask Chuck, because I see the minutes of your committee meeting, that is there any need for us to help you out in any way with the code for like the shrubbery and things that you need for like that mini storage on 10 or the solar farm on 10?
No, I think once we found out where in the current code that the regulations apply to allow us to require the additional landscaping, I think we were okay. I don't think we were in a position where we said, geez, we got no teeth here, guys. So I think we were okay there, Gary, and I thank you for offering. I'm sure if there's something that we have a concern about, we'll bring it to this committee's attention.
The only thing that I noticed in reading the minutes, maybe I didn't interpret them properly, is I noticed, there was talk of putting some seedlings out. With seedlings, it's going to take a good many years before they're going to be beneficial to solve the problem that is existing.
Yeah, and that was in the side yards on that particular. It's for everybody else's benefit. It was a self-storage project over on County Route 10. Came before the planning board the other night. The biggest concern seemed to be the buffering, the landscaping, and through the deliberations, one of the suggestions was we put seedlings in on the north and south side, which would have been the side yards of the property, and that really wasn't the concern. At least I had, and I think Gary had, and I think Bob LaCourse had. The concern was more along the frontage, and they were proposing like 6 maple trees and some clusters of evergreens at the driveway entrances. But we thought there should be more evergreen concentration between the maple trees. So through negotiation, we were able to get them to add additional landscaping and screening along the frontage, which is what the board wanted. The seedlings, okay, they may grow, they may not. We all have seedlings. We hit them with our mowers. We run them over. They never mature. So because the side yards are abutting another industrial property, that wasn't concerned. Tom, for your benefit, you remember we went through the discussion with the solar site, solar farm back there, trying to screen that off, and all the hoops we tried to jump through to screen it from County Route 10. But I think with this project, it'll provide that screening either through the building or the landscaping that we're proposing along County Route 10. So I think we got what we wanted. The seedlings were just sort of an added benefit.
Hey, Chuck, I read through those minutes also, and the evergreen, the pine trees are going to be planted. Weren't they going to be of substantial size? Weren't they also, I mean, they weren't, everything wasn't seedlings. They were going to
Oh,
be.
no. They're the ones
Yeah.
along County Route 10, the supplemental ones between the maple trees. They
Yeah.
will be a standard size. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, seedlings that are just lollipops for the deer.
They got to eat too, I guess.
Yeah.
You want to go with the parking now then, Eric?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
Sorry to hold you up.
got disconnected there for a second.
Is this on the minimum off-street parking regulations? Is that what we're talking about?
Yep.
Okay.
So
A topic dear and near to you, Tom.
Well, we've certainly got a lot of excess blacktop in this town.
yeah,
That we have.
so let's see where the last we talked about this, there was no draft. We were originally scheduled to review this draft back in March, which is the meeting that we had canceled, the first meeting that we canceled. So I don't know if anybody has any comments from this that they recall or have their draft in front of them. I'd be happy to take any. Essentially, the goal or the reason why this is appropriate to make these changes is that our code requires a tremendous excess of parking. It's the reason why, especially a lot of our older developments from, let's say, the 90s or the late 80s have so much parking. The rules haven't really changed since then. Parking, especially in excess, has a deleterious effect on the environment. It's harder to control for stormwater. Creates a lot of pollutant damage. It also happens to be not economically efficient. You know, having excess parking just requires more maintenance costs. It also theoretically could otherwise be used for more productive use. So, for instance, parking doesn't really add much to the assessed valuation of the town, but if it could otherwise be used for a productive commercial space, then the town would benefit there. So there is some benefit. Also, there's the walkability benefit as we move towards that goal, or multimodal, I guess.
And
So anyways.
Cumulatively, it's a heat sink.
That too, yep. There's a lot of reasons to, I guess, not over provide parking. And then I guess further, a lot of the projects that have come before the planning board have requested essentially reductions of what they would be required in parking. It's fairly standard anyways that everybody requests that. So if everybody's requesting relief from this, it's probably likely that we're requiring too much.
Yeah, and in cases like you just mentioned, Eric, we usually don't give them total relief. We ask them to land bank show where on the property they could land bank it. So if and when it was ever needed, so it can never be said we didn't provide parking according to code.
Yep. Okay.
And probably down the line, based on this virus situation, there may not need to be that much parking also, because a lot of things are going to change, it would seem so.
Yeah.
True.
Good point.
Eric, I haven't read this for 2 months, so maybe if you if it's not too long, you could screen through it, just give the highlights, and we could hopefully revisit next month and maybe talk about it in detail.
Yeah, I don't have a copy of the proposed draft, but you remember, Chuck, we have talked about, I forget when we use banking, using that concrete where the grass is growing through it, kind of like a concrete block
impervious.
turned on its side for the overflow. Somehow codify that as an alternative for overflow parking. We've seen different examples of where that works. Yes, puppy.
Agreed.
Are there points that you want to touch on briefly, Eric? Because we certainly aren't going to be moving forward with this at this meeting. Are you there, Eric?
Eric.
We lost Eric.
His cursor is moving.
Yeah, his cursor's moving around. He's still with us, alive.
Oh, he fell asleep. I hear him snoring.
Somebody's stomach's really growling pretty loud there.
Gary, it's my diet. 10:30 is my window.
He just sent us a note. Can you hear me?
Oh, chat.
Can't hear him.
No.
Where did that note come? No.
That was me. Yeah, you can type.
The diet's working pretty well there, Chuck?
Yeah, I'm around food too much being in the house, but other than that, I got to get out and do some exercise.
Wear your mask.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep. Ooh,
Very
barely.
Yeah, barely.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll speak louder. Can you guys hear me okay now?
Just barely.
Just barely, yeah.
Very weird. Okay. So in drafting this code, what I did was I searched our code for every reference to off-street parking or just parking, so that I would kind of collect everything that might be required and not miss anything, hopefully. So there's a lot of references here, like you'll see on the screen right now, where it references off-street parking, but no changes are requested. This is just to kind of show you guys that that's where it was mentioned. So as we get into the actual changes, I'll just scroll down through, and if I see one that's kind of substantial, I'll let them know. So we talk elsewhere, right, about what the size standard is for off-street parking. So it is necessary or appropriate to have that size standard here. We will still define what an off-street parking space is, but the actual size required will be touched on later. Parking lot. So I added the reference to landscaping, which is appropriate. Okay, so partly to your point, we have requirements that all parking areas shall be surfaced with a dustless, durable, all-weather pavement such as asphalt or concrete. And should we make exemptions for, like you said, area for grass to grow in? And this is kind of an interesting example. Over in Buffalo, New York, they recently passed what they call the Green Code. If this loads up for me, it should show a photo of this parking lot that was permitted over there. It's kind of neat. I'm sure it's something you love. This is a completely green parking lot. I think they have certain exemptions for like handicap parking. It's probably right in there. But so this is going to take a second to load. But essentially the point is it's a durable grassy surface. This was built 2018. So maybe we can get some sort of update for them from this bakery on how well it's working and how easily it is to maintain. But should we make exemption for grass or a more durable grass surface parking lot?
Well,
Hey, Eric, could you send that article out?
It's included in the code. If you see it over here where my mouse is. But I will send this code out again after our meeting, and then you guys can have the link there.
Interesting idea.
Yeah. So
I just, when I look at how much rain we get in the spring and also in the winter, I'm just amazed that you wouldn't be having massive tire tracks, et cetera. So I'm curious how that holds up. If they can do it in Buffalo, we could probably do it here, but I'm still amazed.
Yeah. It was a very cool, interesting idea anyways. There's, I guess, during the construction. But, yep, I'll send that stuff to everybody. And then, you know, I didn't make a suggested change here, but just a comment question along the side that we can discuss later, whether that might be appropriate. Appropriate screening to be required. We already say that in 22076, so it's not. The schedule for off-street parking deleted its entirety. That's kind of the point of this whole revision. So where a private road or drive provides access to more than one, and then it provides a width of what that private drive would be. So this isn't one of those areas where we regulate it twice, and I don't think the standards are the same, but this regulation is more recently defined in the site design and development criteria. So I'm suggesting we just eliminate that here and use the site design requirements. Let's see. We mandate in our MR district that there be adequately sized storage space for boats, trailers, and recreational vehicles. That doesn't seem necessary, I guess. That really increases the cost of development, and it doesn't seem appropriate, I guess, to mandate a parking area for boats and recreational vehicles for this. I don't know. That was a suggested revision that you guys can review.
A lot of HOAs preclude that anyway.
Yeah,
I would imagine. Yeah.
That is probably the case.
So go get a storage unit.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Minimum of 2 spaces. Again, that's kind of what we're doing here. Trying to get rid of that, and it will be provided elsewhere. Or that requirement of how many will be required is noted elsewhere. Tourist homes. So for B&Bs, we do require a significant amount of parking. Each lodging room has 1 street, a minimum of 2 additional spaces, plus a private garage for the owner. It ends up being like 7 or so spaces minimum, or actually it'd be like 4 or 5 minimum, which I don't know, it doesn't seem appropriate, or it seems excessive anyways, especially for somebody trying to run a B&B. If we can reduce the costs on that and improve the tourist economy, maybe that's a good thing. Off-street parking. So here is kind of the meat and potatoes. I added this section to this little bit to the purpose. So it's clear there's no provisions that establish a minimum number of off-street parking spaces. Certain development proposals are required to complete a parking demand analysis, which will assist in determining minimum off-street parking required. Where provided, off-street vehicle parking must comply with the standards of this section.
Parking demand analysis. Okay.
Yeah. And
is that defined somewhere? Before?
I'll touch on that in a little bit.
Sorry.
That's fine. Parking requirements determined by the planning board in the course of their reviews. That language is taken from elsewhere. Off-street parking spaces shall be, so this deletes the 10 by 20 requirement for parking spaces. A lot of code now is generally 9 by 18. And then you see some that are like compact car spaces, whatever, which are even smaller than that. I don't think we should necessarily get into the minimum size of off-street parking spaces, but certainly what we have right now is probably a bit excessive at 10 by 20. Off-street parking. So I'll send this out to you. There's a reference to Buffalo parking codes. Depending on the degree or the orientation of the parking area, the area required for access drives is different. So if you have a diagonal pull-in, you need less space for maneuverability. I don't remember the exact amount, but 100 square feet is appropriate for like a 90-degree turn-in. But if you're doing a diagonal parking, you need less space to maneuver there. So requiring a minimum of 100 square feet is really only appropriate for 90-degree parking. We can get less parking area if, you know, we do diagonal. Off-street parking spaces, should we? This section prohibits shared parking. So say having parking spaces on an adjacent lot and using it for a particular use. Essentially, if we're trying to create complete streets, multimodal travel, this really goes against those goals, not allowing shared parking. It also goes against, I think there's a separate section down here that says the collective provision of off-street parking may be approved by the planning board. So it's kind of weird that you say here that it's not allowed, and then here it is allowed. So to clear this up, we'll eliminate that and allow it if it's approved by the planning board. This mentions a durable surface similar to that previous section I mentioned. So what we decide there can be incorporated there. So the collective provision of parking areas may be allowed. It originally said that you would need the minimum number of off-street parking spaces required in sum total. So if you needed 100 on one lot and 100 on the other, you would need 200 spaces on that shared spot. But that goes against the entire purpose of shared parking, which is that parking demand isn't consistent through time. So if you have an office space, you don't really need a lot of parking on the weekends. But if you have maybe a shopping space or something like that, maybe your demand is higher on the weekend. You can efficiently share that parking that's required or that's provided between two uses and reduce the total number of spaces required. So this section of code is essentially inefficient, and there are better ways to do it. So driveways, these are kind of minimal changes. This incorporates a change from an existing section of code. It changes the format more than anything, this section. This allows parking essentially off-site within a 5-minute walk. So it doesn't necessarily, parking doesn't have to be adjacent to the site, is immediately adjacent, but can be nearby. So essentially the purpose is kind of clear. If somebody has an excess of space within a certain 5-minute walk, they can essentially provide parking for neighboring uses instead of everything being provided on site or immediately adjacent. As I note here in the comments, there may be requirements for handicap parking on site. So we'll have to clarify that. These say essentially where parking will be required, which this touch on. Screening, landscaping, lighting, units of measurement. That since we're not, this all relates to Schedule 2, which is the off-street parking requirements. Since we're eliminating that, it really isn't necessary. Mixed occupancies and use is not specified. This again gets into how parking will be calculated, but since we're requiring a parking demand analysis, it's not necessary to have that. So joint use. Off-street parking requirements of two or more uses, structures, parcels, be satisfied by the same parking. This analysis shall be based on accepted standards such as published in the Institute of Transportation Engineers. So the ITE Transportation Engineers essentially set the standard for how to do parking generation reports. So we'll go essentially by their definition, which is the top of the line, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
So we, in this code, refer back to them as for how it will be. And then, you know, obviously during planning board review, we will have MRB look at that. This will be referenced again in a little bit. Required off-street parking spaces. So this mentions Schedule 2, which will be deleted. Off-street parking shall be provided to meet the demand for the proposed land use. The applicant shall calculate this demand based on accepted standards, such as that or other acceptable standard. Applicability, this doesn't apply to everything. So new construction of principal buildings in excess of 5,000 square feet. So a new construction, if it meets that standard, we'll have to require a parking demand analysis. Less than that will not. Of course, if the planning board wants one, they can request that. That's in the code elsewhere. Or the renovation of a principal building above 50,000 square feet. And then just so everybody's aware where these standards came from, these were essentially what Buffalo used for theirs. Or upon request of the planning board during the course of the, okay, so it's also touched on there. The planning board can request it. Exemptions from requiring this, single family dwellings or two family dwellings, ag operations, or as otherwise stated. I don't believe there is any other ones otherwise stated. Hey. Sorry. Authority for the planning board to modify. The planning board can modify these requirements. That this section here is just related to something that would be deleted. Essentially, the planning board can modify it. If the applicant can document that they provide, let's say, stops for buses, biking, walking elsewhere, or alternative transportation, the planning board can theoretically modify. And this is just suggestions to them. Or if they provide a transportation management plan, that's not really defined in here. But what a transportation management plan is it would say, you know, we're going to provide bus stops for people on site. We're going to provide, let's say the use is going to pay people to take a bike or walk to work, something like that. You know, how are they dealing with potential demand for parking and mitigating it, the steps that they're taking. So it's just a planning document to that effect. And I can send people an example of that, what that would look like. But that's it. I mean, that's probably a lot, but if anybody has any comments now, or if you want to wait till later, do that.
Just out of curiosity, have we seen Creekview come in with phase 2?
Yes.
And how's that working as far as parking goes?
Good. We land banked the same number of units as phase 1. It's the same number of buildings, so it's the same number of demand in terms of parking. So no, it worked out well.
Okay, and the existing phase 1 has worked out okay?
Oh yes, we did ask them that. Did they or did we provide enough parking for phase 1, and they concurred that we did.
Good.
Eric,
So
would you send out all that information to the committee members? And so we get a chance to see it before our next meeting, and we can address the parking at that time.
Yeah, I'll send this out.
Nice job, Eric. Mr. Chairman, I suggest we sort of go through this thing, sort of break it up into sections, because boy, to take it on all at one time, unless it just flows, that you have to look at it all in one piece. But there's a lot to chew on here.
No, I agree with that, because some of the other codes that we've adopted so far, we've done that where we only covered part of it because they were so long and so much information in them. So I agree with you on that, Chuck.
But yeah, send the whole thing out, and we'll at least get started on reading it or rereading it.
Okay. I'll do that.
Well, as we mentioned earlier.
Fortunately, we all have enough time on our hands to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sadly.
I'll expect a lot of comments from everybody.
The new normal.
Well, that's, I think we've covered probably more than we anticipated covering today, which is nice. And so is everybody able to meet on June 1st? Hopefully we could meet in person then, but if not, we'll do the same as we did today. Is everybody okay with the regular meeting being June 1st, which it normally is on the first Monday of the month?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. Anything?
It'll be interesting to see how long Tom's beard is by then, you know?
Yeah.
We'll see.
Not to prolong the discussion, but you did send the spreadsheet out with potential code issues to look at. Anything that we should be focused on here, or did we ever set up? Well, we didn't. The priority was, I guess, to go to on-street parking, right, Gary?
Yes.
Off-street parking. So anything beyond that, I don't know what we're looking at. I see the Eric, the airport disclosure statement. Was that a result of Bob Mintzer's?
Yeah.
Okay. That could be an issue on a particular development. Okay, well, if anybody, I guess at some point we have to prioritize which on this list, or if we have any additions to add that we want to work on.
Well, the thing is, unfortunately, things have changed with this virus, you know, with people being furloughed and things like that. We've been asked to cut back on as much as we possibly could in areas that, you know, is not urgent. Anything that the development office figures as a need, then certainly we will try to help them out in any areas, or like with you, Chuck, or the zoning boards also. But some of the information, we are certainly probably not going to be able to move forward with it due to the fact that of the monies available.
True. I guess if anything else, just start working on some drafts among ourselves. Not that they eventually get pushed on, or if they do get pushed on, they get pushed on in a package at some point. So just to keep us busy.
Right. Is there any? So everybody set on June 1st. So you want to conclude the meeting for today, and we'll talk on June 1st, if not before, for different things, especially if they open things up so we can go to town hall again.
Sounds good.
Stay well, everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody stay well. Take care. Thanks for attending today's meeting.
So long.